way I became a Jehovah's Witness was basically being born into it. I remember some of the sisters in the congregation telling me that they remember taking me out in field service. So when you go door to door and talk to people, they remember taking me with them when I was a baby. So I was born into the Jehovah's Witness organization. I always hated going door to door. It was always kind of embarrassing. I remember when I was little, it didn't bother me so much because I didn't really know what people thought about Jehovah's Witnesses. But the first thing I remember placing with people was the "You Can Live Forever on a Paradise Earth" brochure. And I had a little presentation that I would just say to everybody. I would just show them a picture of the brochure, and the front picture was just a really pretty paradisaic earth. And I would say, do you want to live in a place like this? Well, Jehovah's Kingdom can make the earth like this, and this book will show you how for a contribution of 25 cents. I was about 5 or 6 years old then. Back then, the Jehovah's Witnesses asked for contributions for their brochures, but as I got older, I really started to hate going door to door because I started to see what people really thought about Jehovah's Witnesses. So it was very embarrassing. I was always scared that I was going to see somebody that I knew at school and knock on their door, or see them while I was walking in the neighborhoods, and it happened once, and I was super embarrassed. But yeah, I never really cared for going door to door. Yeah, there were times when the elders in the congregation told me not to associate with people who weren't Jehovah's Witnesses, and there were times when they would even tell me not to associate with people who were Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, my best friend at the time, one of the elders came to my house and was talking to my father, studying with him. And at the end of their study, he talked to me and told me that I needed to watch the people who I associated with at the Kingdom Hall. And I knew who he was talking about, and I confronted him about it. And I never really liked this person. But I told him that I knew who he was talking about. I was probably about 13 or 14. And I told him, to his face in front of my parents, that I wasn't going to stop associating with my best friend. He was my best friend. So I told him that I would not stop associating with that person. And he said, well, just be careful. And I said, okay. But there were several times when they would use their famous quotes: bad association spoils useful habits. And there were several people that I was told not to associate with because they were looked at as bad association, or they were worldly. That's what they call people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. So yeah, there were several times when I was told not to associate with people because they either did not share the Jehovah's Witnesses beliefs, or they were members of the congregation that they viewed as bad association. I was never actually baptized into the Jehovah's Witnesses, but because I had been in the truth since I was a baby, and I had become an unbaptized publisher, I was still considered a brother. They still would call me brother. So I was never baptized, but I did try to get baptized. And while I was going over the questions, there was a little booklet called the United in Worship booklet that you would have to go over the questions in. This little blue book. And while I was going over those questions, another elder came into the room and basically stopped the entire process because another person in another congregation didn't like the fact that I was seeing his daughter. And in the Jehovah's Witness organization, you can't really have a girlfriend or date someone unless you're intending to get married. At the time, I was only about 16 or so. So I really wasn't planning on getting married, but I liked her. She ended up later becoming my wife, and we got married. We divorced later, but I was never actually baptized into the organization. But because I had been associated with them for so long, the same penalties applied to me when I chose to no longer be a part of that organization. What really caused me to start questioning whether that organization was true or not was once I reached a certain age, I started to look at other religions. Being born into it, I never had the opportunity to decide whether I thought this faith was real for me. And it was just thrust upon me. So as I got older, 23 or so, I started to actually look into other religions, other belief systems. I started, reading books about Taoism and Islam and Buddhism. That's a lot of different types of religions and ways of thinking. And once I did that, I started to see that a lot of the things that I was being told were not historically accurate. They were based on beliefs and not truths. And a lot of the things that they believed or that they taught were things that conflicted with my personal beliefs that I started to form. I started to believe that nobody had the right to tell somebody else that their beliefs were wrong. I couldn't in good conscience go to someone's door and tell them that they were going to be destroyed if they didn't believe the same way I believed, because I started to think that in their heart, anybody I'm talking to is going to believe their beliefs as strongly as I believe mine. So who am I to tell them that they're wrong? I can't go and say you're going to be destroyed because God told me that you were going to be destroyed, because that simply wasn't true. So once I started to decide that I could no longer tell someone that they were going to be destroyed by God, it started to cause a real conflict with me being able to, one, go door to door and talk to people, and two, to actually hold on to a faith that I thought was not being completely open and honest with where their belief system came from, or the things that they were teaching us to be fact, when just a little bit of research would show that it was not in fact, and that their quote unquote facts were changing over an extended period of time, and things that I was told were truths, down the line, those truths were changed. So I started to think, if something is true because God told the governing body that it was true, then you can't change it later and say that this is now the truth, because truth is truth. You can't have a truth be changed and both of them still be the truth. That's not possible. So once I started to look into the fact that they made a lot of false prophecies for the end of times. I couldn't go to college because we were told that higher education was a waste of time, and that it was something that time could be used more for Jehovah. And then later that changed, that we weren't able to have blood transfusions, and then that changed and they started to allow partial blood transfusions and things like that. And then once I had a daughter, I knew that there was absolutely no way that if my daughter needed blood and I was the one that could save her life, that I was just going to sit there and let my daughter die. So when I started thinking about those things, I started to think, this is not the right religion for me. A lot of things I wanted to do in life, I knew at a very early age that I wanted to be a choreographer, a dancer, but that thing was frowned upon. My parents never supported me. They told me that I couldn't do it, that I would never make any money, and they, to this day, I've never seen any of the work that I've done. So I was not permitted to do any extracurricular activities. I wanted to play basketball. I wasn't able to do that. I wanted to be a choreographer and a dancer, and I wasn't able to do that. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to go to ITT Technical Institute. Wasn't able to do that. So there were a lot of things I just was not permitted to do, and I always thought that that was unfair, because there was nowhere in the Bible that actually said that you were not able to do those things. So once I started to lift the veil and started to think for myself, I started to have serious doubts about whether or not this faith was real. And so I started to drift away from it. The last thing that happened that actually made me decide that this was not the faith for me was a dream I had when I was about 25. In the dream, I woke up and I went outside, and there were these two figures standing there, and they reached their hands out to me, and I grabbed their hands and I said, you know what, I've been waiting for you guys. And when I grabbed their hands, we flew up into the sky. And normally in my dreams, when I would fly, I would be okay until I reached a certain height, and then I would get scared and I would always fall down and wake up. But in this dream, we kept going up and up and up. We left the earth and we were flying through space, and there were all these shapes, all these colors, and we're flying through this kaleidoscope of colors and shapes, all these fractal patterns. And as we flew through, a white light opened up, and I was sitting in an auditorium. And after a few moments, these three men walked up onto the stage, and they said, we know you've been waiting for a long time, but please be patient. God will be with you in a moment. So I got up and I went to the restroom in the dream. So I went through this door on my right, and there was a big library in this room. So I went into the library, and as I walked in, all the books started falling over, and the shelves started crashing down. And as the shelves crashed, more books just fell on top of these books, and I started climbing, trying to get over the books because they were going to crush me. So I just climbed over the books. I kept climbing, and more books started falling, and more shelves started falling. I kept climbing. I finally got out of the room. When I walked into the next room, there were boulders all covering the room. There were just rocks and dirt everywhere. So I started walking through that room, and the boulders started to crash down, and the rocks and the dirt started crumbling down on top of me. So I started climbing over all these rocks and boulders, and I kept climbing, they kept falling. Eventually I got over all of the boulders and the rocks and the dirt, and there was another door. So I walked through that door, and it was cold. And I had never had a dream where I actually felt cold before, but I felt cold. And there were all these glaciers and ice everywhere. So as I started walking through that room, all the ice and snow started falling down, and I was climbing over that just like I had done in the other two rooms. So I eventually got through that room, and there was another door. I walked through that door, and it was a long black hallway. So I walked through the hallway, and I turned left, and it opened to a big restaurant. So I walked into the restaurant, and I turned left again, and there was a booth where these three guys were sitting. And I walked up to the booth, and the guy in the middle was glowing. And I looked at him, and I said, "You're God, aren't you?" And he just nodded his head like that. And then I looked to my left, and one of the elders in the congregation, actually the same guy that told me I couldn't associate with my best friend, was standing there. And I always hated him. I just could not stand that guy. And I just looked at him, and I looked back at the God figure, and I said, "Why is my stomach hurting?" Because my stomach started hurting. I actually felt it. And he just looked at me, and I looked back at that person, and he said, "Keith, why are you leaving us?" And I said, "Get away from me." And he just vaporized. And I looked back at the God figure, and he said, "Keith, it's not about the destination. It's always about your journey." And right after he said that, I woke up. So the next day, I told my wife at the time that I no longer wanted to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and that I would not be going to the meetings, and I would not be studying the books. And I said, I'm not going to try to do anything to prevent you from going. I've just made up my mind that this religion is not for me. So that is when I stopped being a Jehovah's Witness. I was about 25 years old. So for the first 25 years of my life, I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And from that day forward, I was not. The consequences of walking away from the Jehovah's Witnesses has been that I no longer have any contact with my family. My father became a Jehovah's Witness later in life. I think I was around 31 or 32 when he actually became a Jehovah's Witness. He was not one my entire life, and I never treated him any differently. I always loved him. He was someone I looked up to. I always wanted to be like my dad. And once he became a Jehovah's Witness, the last time I saw him, and my mother for that matter, I was visiting my daughter, and they pulled up outside my daughter's house. And by then they had already kind of started not speaking to me. But they saw me, and they were, happy to see me or whatever. And my father asked me, he said, "You should come to the meetings with us sometime." And I knew this was probably going to be the last time I spoke to him. But I had felt that I had been so dishonest with myself and everybody around me up to that point that it was time for me to just be honest. And so I told him, I said, I'm really glad that you have found a faith that works for you. And I'm really happy for you. And these were my exact words. I said, but that faith is not mine. And I won't be going to the Kingdom Hall with you guys. But I'm very, very happy for you. And he just said, "Oh, okay." And that was the last time I saw or spoke to my parents. It's been so long since I've seen them or spoken to them that I honestly don't even remember what they look like. I had a dream a few weeks ago, And in the dream, my mother walked by, but it wasn't, of course, how she looks now. It was how she looked when I was young. So it was a young version of her, but I have no idea how she looks now. And I think one of the really sad things, besides not having, a family besides my daughter, is that, recently my grandfather passed away, and my grandfather knew how my father was, and he and I would try to figure out a way to reach my father to try to talk to him and see if we could figure out what he was thinking and why he was ignoring everybody. Well, when my grandfather passed away, of course, since I no longer hear from them, I didn't know. I saw on a Facebook post from another relative that's not Jehovah's Witness, but he lives in California, that I just met. He posted that my grandfather had passed away. So one of the really sad things that I think many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses have to deal with is the fact that one day your family will pass away and you won't even know, because you're a bad association, you're an apostate. So one day I know my family will be gone, and I won't know. So in preparation for that, I had to have a funeral for my family. Just by myself, I went into a room and lit some incense and turned off the lights, and I just let all the frustration over the years just come out, and I just had to come to a realization that I was never going to see my family again. And as much as I try to be calm about it, it's very upsetting to know that 7 men in New York have managed to take my family away from me, and that my family listens to every word that those men say, even though they've never even met them or seen them in person. So one of the several things that ex-Jehovah's Witnesses have to deal with is just the sadness of being alone, and the anger that you deal with, because these people are not speaking the truth, but they've managed to take everything that you've known your entire life away from you. And there's really not too much you can do about it. You just kind of have to accept it. So one of the most difficult things to deal with, especially now during the holiday season, is, you see everyone with their families and everyone looks so happy. And, nobody's family is perfect, but at least they have the opportunity to speak to each other. And I think it's even worse than having a family member pass away, because when someone passes away, you accept the fact that you won't speak to them again because they're dead. But to have family that is alive, but they've chosen for you to be dead to them, is a much more difficult thing to deal with than the actual passing away of a relative. If there was anything that I could say to anyone who is thinking of becoming a Jehovah's Witness, or anyone who is a Jehovah's Witness now that has doubts and wants to leave the organization, I would say to really examine what you believe based on who you are and what you think. it's hard to determine what you believe when the only thing you have to verify your beliefs is what someone has told you your entire life. If you've never gone out into the world and experienced the world for yourself and talked to other people and other cultures and other ways of thinking and other religions, you have nothing to verify the information that you've been given your entire life. There's nowhere in the Bible that says that you have to be a member of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society or you will be destroyed. In my opinion, if that were the case, there would be 11 commandments instead of 10, and that one would be number 1, because obviously that's the most important one, if that were true. But of course, belief does not equal truth. You can only go by what you believe in your own heart. So, yes, it's been very difficult. I've had a very difficult time since that's happened, because a lot of times people will leave the organization, but you've been programmed to think that if you ever leave the organization, your life is going to be horrible. And I think a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses' lives are horrible because they carry that belief around with them. So one of the hardest things for me was to get that belief out of my spirit, And once I started to believe, as I believe now, that everything that I need to be happy and a functioning person was given to me at the moment of birth. I don't have to look anywhere else for the things I need to be a productive, happy person. It's already in here. So once I believed that, it was much easier for me to generate the things that I wanted to happen in my life. I've always believed that if you don't like the way your life is, then it's on you to change it. It's just like watching TV. If you don't like the channel, you change it. And for me, the world is like a big television, and I'm the remote. So whatever I want to see happen in my world, all I have to do is turn to the right channel. And so that's what I've done, and that's what I continue to do. It's always a struggle, but I'm still on my journey, and my journey is getting better every day. And I'm happy that I've gotten to a point where I can honestly say that I am happy with who I am. And even though a lot of times it's just me and it's very lonely, I know that no matter what happens to me in my life, that I will be okay. So that is my story, and I appreciate you guys watching. If you found this helpful at all, or if you know anybody that is trying to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses organization or is a part of the organization or not a part of the organization, is thinking of becoming a part of the organization, please share this video with them, and like and share and subscribe. I'm going to have several discussions about the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society organization on my channel. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.